Hello everyone, and let's discuss John F. Kennedy, or JFK, or Jack as he was known as. There's his death date, certainly in November of 1963. We'll talk about the assassination, which was a very sad day in American history. In terms of religion, kind of interesting, our only Roman Catholic president, and actually during the election, that was a real issue. Something that's sort of, I think, hard for us to understand at this point in history. But at the time, a lot of fear was that the Pope might have tremendous influence over the president. So you saw a lot of, resistance having a Catholic president. Democrat, public official, short career in the House, and then a career in the Senate before a very important election in 1960. So this is a really one of those ones I want you to star and circle. Why is this so important? Well, look, it was a very, very close election, both in terms of popular vote and in terms of electoral college vote. But what really makes that election more important is that it is the first election where television really has an impact, an influence. During the election, there was debates, and televised debate especially. And one debate in particular that was very famous was when both men went head-to-head on television, and Nixon looked very sort of washed out and plain. He was just recovering from the flu. He looked sweaty. He had a gray suit on, which did not look really great with a gray background on the television, while Kennedy wore a dark suit. And he also he was tan, he was just on vacation, he wore makeup, so he looked healthy and energetic. So those who were polled after the debate, who watched it on television, thought that Kennedy easily won and defeated Nixon, while those who listened to it only on the radio thought that Nixon won. So again, you see that television now has an impact. So we've seen over time that change progress, where different media, whether it be print, whether it be radio, now it's going to be television, are having a major impact on the American presidency and politics in general. Okay, so there we go. So I want to talk about notable events, and obviously there's some important things here that are absolutely crucial. That first bullet point I told you about the television debate was great. Second bullet point is also important. Okay, but let me kind of go into the third bullet point. 1961, the Bay of Pigs invasion. This was a attempted invasion of Cuba by exiles from Cuba in Florida. So you had these individuals in Florida who wanted to get rid of Castro in Cuba. Remember, Cuba now was under communist rule under Castro. There was a revolution in the 1950s. A lot of the patriots of Cuba were exiled to Florida, mostly around the Miami area. And our government, this was under the Eisenhower administration, with the CIA, was working out a plan to invade Cuba with CIA support to get rid of Castro. Kennedy didn't really like the plan, but Eisenhower encouraged him to go through with it after the election, and as they transferred power, Kennedy goes through it, and it's a disaster. We really don't support the Cuban exiles that much, unfortunately, and Castro easily puts it down, and basically it's an embarrassment for the young president, and it heightens Cold War tensions after that point. Another thing you could add is in 1961, you also had the beginning of the Peace Corps. The Peace Corps is this sort of peaceful organization, obviously, and the idea is that we're going to send young people, like college students, all over the world, mostly in third world developed countries, basically to help them out, provide maybe education resources, help them get clean water, build schools, build better housing for them, and sort of a good thing for us to do that's not militarily related. All right, it's supposed to help us, stop the spread of communism through peaceful means. All right. Another important event, certainly, is in 1963, is the beginning of the Vietnam War in terms of military involvement. Remember, our role in the Vietnam War went back to the 1940s under Truman. We're giving money to France to help them fight the war in Vietnam. That continues through the 50s. But by the 60s, we try to help them even more. And at this point, it's really being focused on, how should I say this, training the South Vietnamese army. So we sent about 16,000 advisors, and Kennedy makes it really clear, and here's the quote, it's their war, that we're only there to help them out, to help train. We're not there to actually help fight their war. So there's a lot of debate about this, and the debate really centers around if Kennedy was killed, wasn't killed, would there have been a Vietnam War to the heights and to the levels that it got to? It's a hard question to answer. A lot of people say no, because Kennedy would have kept the limit on it, but you just don't know what circumstances might have arose that would have warranted him to doing the same thing that Johnson did. Okay. Now, another big topic is civil rights. Kennedy, certainly is a fan of civil rights, more so than the previous president, Eisenhower, but still sort of wants civil rights leaders like King to go slow. So one example is during the campaign, he promised that he would end discrimination in all federally funded public housing, just as an executive order with a pen. Well, he gets elected and he's inaugurated, he's sworn into office, and he doesn't do anything. So a lot of people get frustrated. He receives thousands and thousands of pens in the mail. And it's through that means that he's pressured to actually sign that executive order. Some other influential, more important things were the Freedom Riders in the 1960s. These were young white and black college students who went on buses through the South to help desegregate bus stations in the South. And again, at first when you get to like Virginia, it's not too bad, but as you get to the deep South, Carolinas, Georgia, Mississippi, it becomes really clear that these people don't want them there. And there's violence, people get hurt, buses are bombed. Also, 1963, King marches on Washington. That's the famous I Have a Dream speech. The Kennedy administration urged him not to do this, but he did so anyway. Also, a little bit of backpedaling. In 1961, you had the Berlin crisis, where basically the Soviet Union cuts off access between East and West Berlin. Just as a quick review, remember, after World War II, Germany was divided in half between East and West Germany. Berlin, the capital of Germany, was in East Germany, but the city itself was divided into like a free zone with the United States, England, and France there on the west side, and then the east side, Soviet controlled it. So people were leaving from East Berlin to get to West Berlin to get out. So the Soviets under Khrushchev block it. They put up a wall. So this is the beginning of the Berlin Wall and just more heightened Cold War tensions. Also in 1962, you had the Cuban Missile Crisis, a very dramatic event in United States history, where now, after the failed attempt to get rid of Castro, the Soviets start putting missile sites into Cuba, aimed at the United States. Our surveillance picks it up, and there's almost a war, right? We put a naval blockade around Cuba, and the Soviets almost break the blockade. They sent their own vessels on their way, and at the pretty much the last moment, they turn around and war is averted. But people were really nervous. This was going to be a World War III. This was the end of the world as we know it, and this was one of the finer points of the Kennedy administration dealing with the Soviets. They work out a compromise. Well, we'll remove our missiles from Turkey, and the Soviets will remove their missiles from Cuba. This is also the beginning of the space race. Kennedy makes the claim that he must put a man on the moon within 10 years, which we do in 1969. And unfortunately, though, on November 22nd, the president is assassinated in Dallas, which is a very sad day for Americans, and certainly. All right, miscellaneous fun facts. It's about 6'1", 6'1", 170 pounds, looked really handsome and youthful and athletic, but in reality, he's a man in very poor health. A lot of back problems, severe back problems, was constantly on medication, constantly in pain, but still very charming, graceful, witty. Grew up in a very wealthy family, got a trust fund for $1 million when he was 21 years old. Recreation, sailing, swimming, golfing, was actually a pretty good golfer. And that's JFK. All right, thanks so much. Have a great day, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.